The Royal Garden Hotel ordered to close for 14 days as 3 more staff members test positive for the coronavirus. Hotel guests are evacuated and about 300 workers go into quarantine. And in the U.S., uncertainty over the second presidential debate after Trump said no to the idea of the event going virtual.
Good evening and welcome. Hong Kong reported 8 coronavirus cases today. 7 of them are locally acquired. The only imported case is from India.
Most alarmingly, 300 staff members of the Royal Garden Hotel in Tsim Sha Tsui East are being sent to quarantine after 3 more employees tested positive for the virus. Among the new local patients, 3 are close contacts of earlier cases. One of them is a friend of a person who visited the virus-hit bar, China Secret, in Tsim Sha Tsui, and recently tested preliminary positive for the virus. Meanwhile, a 25-year-old man who lives with his parents in Prince Edward has also come down with the coronavirus. His source of infection is unknown. But all eyes are on the Royal Garden Hotel in Tsim Sha Tsui East, where 3 more employees have tested positive for the virus. They include an Italian restaurant waiter, a cafe chef, and an air conditioning maintenance worker of the hotel. So far, 4 workers of the Royal Garden have been infected.
They are all male staff. They share the staff canteen as well as the restroom, changing room at the B3 level. So we regard there's an outbreak affecting the male staff who had used the changing room in the B3 floor, and around 300 male staff working in the Royal Hotel who had used the changing room as close contact.
This afternoon, workers wearing protective clothing registered details of the hotel staff before sending them to quarantine. All hotel guests were evacuated before noon today. This guest says he wore a mask all the time during his stay, except for when he was in a restaurant, and he believes the infection risk is not high. Meanwhile, this woman had been staying at the hotel because of renovation work at her home. She has now been arranged to stay at another hotel in Tsim Sha Tsui. The Royal Garden will close for 14 days for thorough disinfection. Guests who made reservations for the hotel or restaurants there can cancel or change their bookings for free. Starting today, 46 outpatient clinics around town have extended their service hours for those who would like to get specimen bottles for their COVID-19 tests. Health authorities are looking into setting up temporary testing centers in districts that saw a spike in cases recently, such as Kowloon City and Tsim Sha Tsui.
The city's bar sector is moving fast to propose extra preventative measures to be put in place at local establishments to avoid another possible shutdown.
This as the number of infections linked to a Tsim Sha Tsui bar continues to rise, leading to calls for tight social distancing measures. Haley Zhou has more.
Bars and clubs in the city are fearful the government will ask them to shut down again, saying they're first to close, last to reopen. One of the major COVID-19 infection clusters in recent days emerged at the China Secret Bar in Tsim Sha Tsui. So far, 13 cases were reported there. Health officials are making a move.
As bars are very favorable places for certain citizens, we can provide outreach service through mobile team to encourage the bar staffs and also the customers to get the bottles for testing.
Wing Chin, vice president of the Hong Kong Bar and Club Association, is urging the sector to strictly follow current government restrictions, such as the 2 per table limit at bars as opposed to 4 at restaurants. But he says extra measures proposed by other associations, such as providing customers with straws for a drink, wouldn't help, and requiring customers wear protective gowns would take away PPE from those who need it more, like medical workers. In a meeting with bar industry representatives yesterday, officials reportedly said there wouldn't be further aid for the sector if there is a 4th wave. Haley Zhou, TVB News.
The hospital authority has sent emails to staff members who went on strike in February, asking them to give a reason for their absence. Hospital workers are required to provide an explanation by October 23rd. The HA Employees Alliance, who organized the strikes in February, is urging the email recipients not to respond on their own. Instead, the alliance will provide a template for members to reply.
U.S. President Donald Trump is preparing to return to the campaign trail with a pair of weekend rallies.
Despite a COVID-19 diagnosis that sidelined him for a week in the race against Democratic nominee Joe Biden for the White House, Trump insists he feels perfect.
We are making tremendous progress with this horrible disease.
Other than a few White House-produced videos, Trump has not been seen in public since his Monday return from a military hospital. The president is eager to return to the campaign trail and boost a campaign that is trailing in the national polls and in most battlegrounds. Trump has received experimental treatments for the virus, but questions continue to swirl over his progress.
I don't want people thinking that all they're going to do is get sick and get Regeneron and be miraculously better. That is not how this drug works. There is no cure for this disease.
I think that if I'm going to follow the commission recommendation, if he goes off and he's going to have a rally, I don't know what I'll do. You never know what's going to come out of his mouth.
With Trump under fire for his handling of the pandemic and the election less than 4 weeks away, millions of Americans have already cast ballots. More evidence the race will be defined by the coronavirus, despite the White House's attempts to make it about almost anything else.
U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is questioning President Donald Trump's fitness to serve. She plans to announce legislation that would create a commission to allow Congress to intervene under the 25th Amendment to the Constitution. It allows the president's cabinet members to remove the president from executive duties. The vice president would then immediately assume the powers of acting president. Pelosi also said there will be no additional federal aid for U.S. airlines without a more comprehensive COVID-19 relief package.
I have been very open to having a single standalone bill for the airlines or part of a bigger bill. But there is no standalone bill without a bigger bill. The comment that I made to the administration last night was, we're happy to review what that standalone bill would look like as part of a bigger bill, if there is a bigger bill. But there is no standalone bill.
Pelosi said Democrats are still at the table, and her office resumed conversations with top negotiator, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin. After President Donald Trump abruptly halted talks this week, Pelosi added she is hopeful for a larger deal because it has to be done.
13 men, 7 of them associated with an anti-government militia group, have been arrested on charges of conspiring to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Prosecutors say the suspects plotted to abduct Whitmer, who has clashed with President Donald Trump over coronavirus restrictions ahead of next month's presidential election. They say the conspirators schemed to storm the state capitol building and take hostages, but later switched to a plan to kidnap Whitmer at her vacation home. Whitmer says the men who sought to kidnap her are sick and depraved, and she accused Trump of inciting political extremism.
And to be deceptive. Our head of state has spent the past 7 months denying science, ignoring his own health experts, stoking distrust, fomenting anger, and giving comfort to those who spread fear and hatred and division. The President of the United States stood before the American people and refused to condemn white supremacists and hate groups like these 2 Michigan militia groups. Stand back and stand by, he told them. Stand back and stand by. Hate groups heard the President's words not as a rebuke, but as a rallying cry.
Coronavirus infections are increasing across Europe, leading to several nations to mull the possibility of more lockdowns. Those possible restrictions come as more countries join the global initiative in finding a COVID-19 vaccine. Peter Cavillas has the details.
Spanish officials will hold an emergency cabinet meeting to consider a state of emergency in Madrid and its surrounding region. The meeting comes after a Madrid court struck down a national government order that imposed a partial lockdown in the Spanish capital and its suburbs. Madrid accounts for 31% of all cases in the country. Intensive care wards across France are filling up again with COVID-19 patients. In Paris alone, coronavirus patients account for 40% of the region's ICU beds. Infections are up nationwide, and the cities of Lyon, Lille, Grenoble, and Saint-Etienne will go on maximum coronavirus alert level Saturday. Paris and Marseille were put on maximum alert level earlier, which led to the closure of bars in those cities. The Czech Republic's daily case count rose to 5,394, the third record tally in a row. The government will now shut theaters, museums, fitness centers, and public swimming pools for at least 2 weeks. Restaurants and bars will have to close at 8 p.m., and only 4 people will be allowed at one table. Russia reported 12,126 new infections, its highest tally since the pandemic began. Authorities in Moscow are now considering closing bars and nightclubs to halt a second coronavirus wave. The British government is mulling fresh restrictions. In many areas of northern England, it's not clear the local measures have worked. In some areas, the number of new infections is 10 times higher than when the localized virus restrictions were announced. Meanwhile, US-based Novavax kicked off a late-stage trial of its potential COVID-19 vaccine in the UK. 10,000 people are being given a shot to test its efficacy.
Masks and distances, that slows the growth. That enables us to get back to some sort of normality before the vaccines are created and in use. So it's really important to take note of that. Vaccines are good things, they work.
China, which already has 4 coronavirus vaccine candidates in stage 3 clinical trials, said today it's joining the COVAX vaccine facility. The alliance is designed so that richer countries agree to buy into potential vaccines and help finance access for poorer ones. The U.S. has declined to join the alliance. Peter Cavillas, TVB News.
Clashes erupted across Indonesia during nationwide strikes against a polarizing new labor law. Police fired tear gas at protesters as they tried to approach the presidential palace in Jakarta. Demonstrators hurled rocks and bottles in return. Police in the capital say they detained about 1,000 people, while hundreds were arrested in other cities. Nationwide protests began earlier this week against a new omnibus bill. Demonstrators say the law will hurt workers by reducing severance pay, removing restrictions on manual labor by foreign workers, increasing the use of outsourcing, and converting monthly salaries to hourly wages. The government says the law is needed to improve the investment climate and create jobs in Southeast Asia's largest economy. A growing number of regional leaders also oppose the new legislation. Still ahead in tonight's news, Starry Lee elected as the LegCo House Committee chairperson. In South Korea, a massive fire at a high-rise apartment building. And this year's Nobel Peace Prize awarded to the UN World Food Program. Welcome back to TVB News. The Legislative Council's House Committee and Finance Committee held separate meetings today.
The gatherings were held to elect leaders for the 2020 to 2021 session. Pan-Democratic lawmakers made multiple nominations during the House Committee election, including Regina Ip, Junius Ho, and Chan Kin-po of the pro-establishment camp. All pro-establishment lawmakers rejected the Pan-Democrats' nominations. Starry Lee was re-elected as chairperson of the House Committee, while Ma Fung-kwok was again elected as the deputy chair. As for the Finance Committee, Chan Kin-po and Chan Chun-ying were both re-elected as chairman and vice chairman, respectively. The government is subsidizing expenses incurred by eligible candidates running in the now postponed Legislative Council election. However, some worry of a loophole in the practice. Kena Chiu tells us more.
Due to the coronavirus pandemic, the government not only postponed the general polls, but also made the decision to fully subsidize relevant expenses by eligible candidates. The arrangement has since drawn eyeballs to Yunlong District Councillor and Super C contender Henry Wong, who has reported $4.89 million of election expenditure. $4.5 million was attributed to donated goods and services provided by a single company. That includes image consulting, scripting, and photography, valued at some $920,000. Responding to inquiries, the Registration and Electoral Office said the payout will depend on the amount declared by each candidate. This includes donations used for expenses and filed as such. Candidates seeking the funds must support their declarations with an election report and an auditor's report. The auditor is required to keep an eye out for any suspicious numbers or incomplete bookkeeping. Pro-Beijing lawmaker Elizabeth Kwok says the subsidy should not cover service-related donations filed as expenses, as the amount can often be arbitrarily determined. Having also received cash donations from her own DAB party, she deems it necessary for authorities to play its gatekeeping role to prevent an abuse of the public coffers. Kena Chiu, TVB News.
Sources say the government will announce details to redevelop Tai Hang Sai Estate in Shek Kip Mei in the Chief Executive's policy address on Wednesday. It is expected that at least 5,000 units will be built by the Urban Renewal Authority and sold at subsidized prices. Pinky Wong has more.
Built back in 1965, Tai Hang Sai Estate is the only privately owned rental housing estate for low-income families in Hong Kong. Mrs. Zhu has been a resident there for over half a century. Products of the older days are still visible in the 300 square foot unit. The rent for the place is some $700. Mrs. Zhu said she loves living here, and so does her daughter. She also doubted where she could find a place to rent with such a low price in the city. The housing estate is constructed and managed by a non-profit organization, the Hong Kong Settlers Housing Corporation Limited. Back in 2016, the Town Planning Board gave the organization the green light to redevelop the estate as a youth hostel, providing some 4,900 units. Yet the redevelopment did not go as planned because of unresolved disputes with residents there. In the 2018 policy address, the government proposed to redevelop the place. Sources say details will be announced in the upcoming policy address. According to the sources, the Hong Kong Settlers Housing Corporation may collaborate with the Urban Renewal Authority on the redevelopment. They will redevelop the estate in phases, leaving 2 of the 8 buildings for existing residents. Some 5,000 units are expected to be built and sold at subsidized prices. Lawmaker Priscilla Leung, who has been active in redevelopment projects, said priorities should be given to residents there. She said they shouldn't be required to draw lots for their units, while the price of flats should be set at below market prices. Leung also urged the government to be more mindful of the timetable of the redevelopment projects, as the process could often take years. Pinky Wong, TVB News.
At least 88 people were treated for smoke inhalation and other minor injuries after a massive fire in South Korea. Strong winds helped spread the blaze through a high-rise apartment building in the city of Busan. A huge ball of orange flame was seen soaring up the 33-floor building and shooting through the roof as crews tried to put out the blaze. Hundreds of residents had to be evacuated. Dozens more had to escape to the roof. Officials say the fire started on the balcony in one of the lower floors late Thursday. An investigation into the cause of the blaze is underway.
The Nobel Peace Prize went to the United Nations World Food Programme for its efforts to combat hunger. Last year, the organization provided assistance to almost 100 million people in 88 countries. The Nobel Committee said the coronavirus pandemic has only made the situation more dire. It called on global leaders to provide financial assistance to help the World Food Programme and other relief agencies to feed the hungry. The award comes with a 10 million Swedish krona cash prize. That's the news. Thanks for watching.
Good night.